When one thinks of a pastor, immediately preaching comes to mind. There are so many layers and steps to preaching, starting from when the initial Bible study is started by the pastor to when the sermon is given from the pulpit to the congregation. In this presentation, we will discuss types of preaching, preaching tips, and the prosperity gospel. There are two main types of preaching, expository and topical, that we will get into an in-depth discussion of. But we also want to focus on several tips for engaging with the audience so that the sermon lands. It is also vital to avoid false doctrine when preparing our sermons as well as presenting of them. One of these false doctrines is the prosperity gospel. The prosperity gospel is not biblical teaching, and unfortunately has creeped in and even infiltrated some churches with its false teachings. There are two main types of preaching, topical and expository. The easiest way to discuss the similarities and differences is to look at an example of both. If a pastor is preaching on the topic of tithing, this would be an example of topical preaching. The topic is decided on up front, and then the Bible study begins to support that topic, making sure to not pull any verses out of context. If, however, the pastor is preaching on Corinthians, this would be expository, as the book of the Bible is the starting point for the sermon. While they seem very different, they can be similar too. There are several main topics in the book of Corinthians which could lend to a topical sermon. They are also similar in that no matter what the style of preaching, it is important to not pull verses out of context. They are different in how they start, by the topic or the passage. Expository sermons can also lend themselves to a sermon series that's longer, for example, the books of Corinthians, as opposed to shorter topics. Storytelling is a powerful preaching tool and one that Jesus used when he was teaching. One of the types of stories he used was the parable. Part of the power of a story is that people remember it and get captivated by it, just like with the parables. When telling a story, it is important to remember that voice inflection and other nonverbal cues are vital so that the story is relatable and pulls the audience in. Part of pulling the audience in is to connect with the audience. Nonverbal cues are part of what establishes trust between the audience and the preacher. If a preacher appears to be standoffish or angry, the audience will not feel that they can trust the speaker. If the audience does not feel they can trust the speaker, they will not be open to the sermon's message. There are also different types of nonverbal cues that can put the audience on the offense. For example, a fake smile, crossed arms, or hands in the pockets. When starting the sermon, there are several ways to capture the audience's attention. This could be a question, a verified statistic, or humor. In our church, we have a joke that we lead a question. That is, why, you ask? Well, I'm so glad you asked, let me tell you. It gets a chuckle, but it also lets everyone know to pay attention. Make sure to verify statistics because nothing can break your trust more than someone verifying a fact and finding it was not true and throwing out the entire sermon. A word of caution for preachers is vital when it comes to preaching false doctrine. A prevalent false doctrine that is not biblical is the prosperity gospel. The prosperity gospel has several layers and aspects to it. Two of these are name it and claim it and a prosperous life. While this sounds amazing, it simply does not stand up to the Bible and is founded on verses that have been pulled out of context. Two biblical figures that one can use to show that a prosperous life is not guaranteed is Job and Jesus. Job lost everything, and Jesus, who was sinless and God, lost his life brutally, although he did it willingly. It is important as a preacher to personally reflect to make sure that the prosperity gospel has not sneaked into your life. It could be as simple as, God, why me? I do everything for you. We have looked at types of preaching, expository and topical, tips for engaging the congregation while preaching, and harmful aspects of the prosperity gospel. This just skims the wealth of knowledge for preachers who are looking to grow in their preaching It is always important to remember to stay humble and teachable.